Hello friends, I'm going to be playing another game from my Steam backlog. Today the game is Gris, and Gris is the story of a young woman dealing with a painful experience in her life. The gameplay is her surreal journey in handling these emotions that play out in a platform game that is free of frustration and free of written narrative. There are no cheap deaths in this game. I'm pretty sure dying is impossible, and there are no enemies to fight. Instead, Gris makes her way across multiple landscapes that require some very light puzzle solving. Visually, this game is gorgeous with an art style that really has to be seen as it's not easy to explain. Each area she travels to is a bizarre and wondrous landscape. Gris begins her journey in a bleak black and white open area. There's crumbled architecture, specks of white dusk, and bending foliage with rocks jutting out of the ground and twisting and turning. Gris runs across a wisp that follows her around. These wisps can be used to automatically form platforms to access new areas. The great thing about this level, and indeed most of all of the other levels I played, is that exploration is kept to a minimum. There are no mazes, no tricks, it's simple exploration, and that's all that's needed. In any other game that would be a detriment, but the world of Gris is so enjoyable that stress-free exploration just melds seamlessly with the wonders of the world. Before discussing the next area, I have to point out the great use of sound in this game. One of the Steam reviews mentioned the soundtrack was similar to Hans Zimmer Interstellar soundtrack, and I agree. The game is even tagged as Great Soundtrack in Steam. There are lulls where no music is played, and instead the ambient sounds of winds and Gris's footsteps are all that can be heard. The next level goes from a white palette to a red palette. Pale pink skies and red ground. The level could almost be mistaken for Mars. Crab-like creatures scuttle across using red rocks as their shells, and they pose no harm to Gris. A red dust storm sweeps across every few minutes with a ghostly sound accompanying it. The storm pushes Gris back across the map, but it can be avoided by going inside structures. The game communicates this by having weather vanes that spin fiercely during the storm, but remain stationary when inside a structure during the dust storm. After some exploration, Gris finds wisps that can be used to transform her dress into a solid block, which grants her immunity to the winds in the storm and allows her to crush some types of rocks. At the end of the level, Gris smashes down into a subterranean cavern filled with weeping statues. Story-wise, the game is about Gris dealing with her grief. I have to say that I didn't glean any of that in my hour or so with the game. However, there are enough Steam reviews out there that it sounds like that information gets communicated in later levels. Gris clocks in around the 8-hour mark to complete, which seems like a perfect amount of time for a game like this. Any longer would just be padding out the gameplay. Gris retails for $17, but has been available for cheaper than that, including being in the most recent Humble Bundle monthly. If you're looking for a stress-free game that takes you on a journey into just an incredibly illustrated and drawn world, then Gris is an absolute recommendation from me.